We're now underway with the Hypercar session, and Andrew Frankel up here again. And Andrew, I mean, we really do have an eclectic mix, and they're just steadily making their way out. The GT, the Golf Livery Ford GT is just changing its mind at the moment, moving itself out of the way. So I'm guessing there's a slight issue there. What's this just coming around the first corner here?
That is a very rare bird indeed, and a very fine one of that. That is a Noble M600. So these things, you know, they were making these things sort of 10, 12 years ago. They've got, well, it's based on a Volvo engine in them, but I think they're Yamaha tuned, and they like 600 horsepower, and it's really light. This was like a sort of British version of the Ferrari F40, or that's what they tried to achieve, and do you know what, they pretty much got there. You know, you don't see them around too much because they've made tiny numbers. I think the company is still in fact, looking at the number plate, I might have driven that car. But it's, yeah, I mean, they're just great road track cars, very simple, very basic, no driver aids, absolutely as it should be. You know, it's you, the car, and the track. 600 horsepower, really light car, you know, 1,200 kilos or so, just great fun.
Well, and I think this one here is the F40 LM, is it not? Just judging from the wing on the back of that.
Well, it's either an LM or a GT. They made two different versions of racing F40s. They're all made by an Italian company called Michelotto. They weren't made by Ferrari. And they made 19 LMs and 5 GTs. And basically, the LMs were designed to race in IMSA racing in the US, and the GTs, which ended up being GTE cars, raced in what they called the BPR, which we'd now recognise as being the World Endurance Championship. So yeah, so very different to a standard F40. You know, much lighter, full race suspension, race brakes, but also big turbos, big intercoolers. Instead of 400 and what was it, 78 horsepower, an F40 LM was rated at 720. So you can imagine, you know, it probably didn't weigh a ton in race trim, 720 horsepower. I mean, the amazing thing about them was that they were still winning races sort of 8-9 years after the F40 first came out. They were so effective, even though, like the McLaren F1, it was never originally designed to be a racing car.
And yet, picking up on what you said is your favourite to drive, you said the F40, but you didn't say the F50. The car that has stood out for me today, just behind that Porsche, is the Aston Martin Vulcan.
Yeah, not had the pleasure.
No.
I've driven something close to it. I've driven a thing called a Victor, which was a one-off car, which was basically a Vulcan made ever so slightly road legal. But yeah, I mean, the Vulcan, it's a 177 chassis, but with this bonkers 7-litre 800 horsepower engine, and it was it's a track day car, but a track day car like no other. And do you know what I love about it most? I love the fact that it exists. I think they only made 25 of them. They sound extraordinary, they look extraordinary, and I just want to have a go in one. I mean, it just looks like all the fun in the world, doesn't it? You know, big front engine V12, ridiculous amounts of power, rear drive, nothing else. What's not to like?
And apparently sticks the road like nobody's
Well, it would
business.
do, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean, you know, full race suspension, you know, obviously lots of aero, big fat slick tyres. I just think you could, if you got one of those and went around here, and I think you'd died and gone to heaven. It's just
well, I know
brilliant.
I've said this before. When I was at Brands Hatch and they brought these out to play, and a mixture of Stefan Rattel jumped in the passenger seat. You know, professional racing drivers and racing instructors also jumped in the seat, and they came back, got out of the car in the pit lane for me to greet them with a microphone in hand, and no matter what experience they had, they were like going, that is incredible, that is insane, that they could not get their head around the speed that it could take into the corner, how late it could brake, how much speed through it, and how early it could pick up the throttle again. And noise-wise, I was just loving that you could tell exactly which corner it
wherever it was,
out in the
right
country.
Around the lap.
It's just an incredible car. And this one here?
McLaren P1 GTR. It's a 1,000 horsepower hybrid hypercar. Another one of these curious things, it's one of these track cars, so you can't race this and you can't use it on the road. It's a car that you basically use for this sort of thing. You go to tracks, and McLaren organise days where, you know, lots of these things will turn up, and yeah, I mean, they are just, so it's a McLaren P1, but made for the track. It's, you know, and the problem with the cars like the McLaren P1 road legal versions are, and it's the same with all of them, they're all limited by their tyres and their suspension because they've got so much power, but they have to have, you know, ground clearance, they have to have ride quality, they have to have tyres which will last a few thousand miles. And so they're all compromised to an extent by that, and it's nobody's fault. But then, so you create something like this, which doesn't have cats on it, so you have more power, and it's lighter. You can put a full aero pack on it because it doesn't have to comply with any road regulations. You can put race suspension on it, you can put slick tyres in it, and suddenly you have a completely different car. And these things are absolutely nuts. And they are. I mean, just 1,000 horsepower, very little weight. You know, you do the maths. It's an extraordinary experience.
The Porsche we saw making some moves at the top of the craners there, that was the GT, I noticed from the back of it. And I'm trying to remember, that's not the Holy Trinity one.
No, that was before that. That was kind of like the first of those cars. That was the, you know, so the Carrera GT was succeeded by the 918 Spider. The Carrera GT was actually started life as a Le Mans car. Porsche built this complete Le Mans car which worked and it ran, and it had this wonderful V10 engine in it. And then something happened. I think they changed the regs, which Porsche thought was foul play. And so they were left with this thing and thought, well, what do we do with it? And they thought, we might as well turn it into a road car. And they turned it into the Carrera GT. They made quite a few of them. I think they made about 1,300, which in terms of production of things like the 918 and certainly LaFerraris and P1s, it's quite a lot of cars. And I think that the Carrera GT, which is I only drove one for the first time quite recently.
I think that's the Monza SP2 Ferrari.
It is the Monza SP2 Ferrari, yes. That's going, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, he's on the brakes there.
And in fact, there's no passenger in it to make sure he can go for it as well, or at least there isn't a passenger in it anymore.
Do you know, it's so nice seeing something like that being driven because, you know, those are the sorts of cars you quite often see either static or being driven not very fast, and he's having a go in it, isn't he?
Yeah.
And it's great to see. It's, you know, it's what these cars were built to do, and it's fantastic that they can come here to an event like this and get out on a fantastic track like Donington, which is just the sort of track on which you'd want to exercise a car like that. Wide open spaces, but also every kind of corner. Oh, he's slowing down now.
He's heard you.
He probably has. There's everything here, isn't there? It's a real challenge, but you've usually got somewhere to go if it goes wrong. And I just love that combination because it means you can commit in a way that, you know, there are some circuits where I go and I race where, you know, particularly if you're in somebody else's machine, you have to really take care. And of course you take care everywhere, but at least here, it's open and it's fast, but it's, you know, there is some runoff, and yeah, I love the challenge of this circuit.
Without it being too much runoff, I mean, we were just chatting about both of us realising that both of our local circuits is Castle Combe.
Yeah.
No runoff.
No runoff.
Really exciting stuff. And then you got Silverstone that is all runoff.
Yeah.
You know, and this is kind of quite nicely in the middle. Wonderful noise there as you see the Aston Martin Vulcan going down the start-finish straight. Well, that means it went straight past our window. Sadly, it's just gone past the checkered flag, I think I saw out there on the corner of the picture there, which means the end of that session. But that noise as it screams down there is just incredible.
There is no replacement for a naturally aspirated large V12 engine being, you know, given, you know, full tap. It's the noise, isn't it? It's, you know, there are all sorts of other interesting noises, and I love V10s and V8s and everything else, but no, the V12 is where it's at, isn't it? That is the end of the session, isn't it? What a shame.
It is, I know.
But you know what? It was fun while it lasted, and what a privilege to be able to stand here and watch cars of that caliber being driven fast.